Good morning, Ram Ram, Namaste, Namaskaram, Salam Alaikum, and Bula to all the Fiji Indians living in Fiji and all the Fiji Indians living abroad, whichever country you are living in today. So today marks the 146 years of Girmityas being taken to Fiji, and I would just like to cover what other countries the Girmityas were taken to by the British and the French. So the countries the Girmityas were taken to work on plantations were South Africa, the island of Reunion near Mauritius, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, which was known as East Africa before, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, St. Kitts, St. Vincent, Guadeloupe, Suriname, French Guiana, British Guiana, Belize, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Fiji. And also, some Indians were taken and settled in Belize after a mutiny in India by the Indian soldiers against the British Army. So there is still a small percentage of Indian population living in Belize. But also I would like to mention that where did the slavery of Indians being taken to another country began? So when Vasco da Gama invaded Goa, the first round of slaves were taken by the Portuguese, and they were settled in a city called Sao Paulo in Brazil. There is still an active but a small Indian community, which are nearly the 8th or 10th generation still living in Brazil. So, just very briefly, in many of the countries the Girmityas were settled, they encountered many problems before those countries attained independence and even after attaining independence. The military coup against Dr. Chedi Jagan in Guyana, the discrimination, the riots that took place in Guyana, many Indian Guyanese left for United States and Canada to settle. The same happened in Suriname, and droves of Indian Surinamese left for Netherlands. After the end of the era of apartheid in South Africa, many Indians have left the shores of South Africa to settle in other countries. We all know what happened to the Indians in Uganda. And after the 4 military coups in Fiji, a large number of Indians have left Fiji also. So, I will be very brief and I'll cover different topics today as I go on regarding the 146th arrival day of Girmityas to Fiji. So there has been posts, and a number of people have written that the people who were brought on Leonidas were then taken to work on sugarcane plantation, which is totally false. It is similar to when I was doing social studies and history from class 7 to form 4. So when the Girmityas were brought to Fiji in 1879, a successful sugarcane plantation was set up on Wakaya Island by David Whippy. The Girmityas were bought on the vessel Leonidas. They were taken to 5 key locations. On Rambi Island, they were engaged in copra plantation. In Gila Tavuni, they were engaged in copra plantation. In Dwasamu Tailevu, they were engaged in copra plantation and rice farming and vegetable farming. In the interior of Naitasiri, where the Wainimala and Wainimbuka river meet, they were engaged in banana plantation and rice farming. They were very huge banana plantations, or very large banana plantations. In Bilalevu Singatoka, they were engaged in vegetable farming. In and around Coronivia and Nasuri town and Vudi, right to the Rewa Delta, they were engaged in clearing and getting rid of coffee weed for many months. So that was what the first batch of Girmityas who came on Leonidas were engaged in these particular activities. And then, when they were taken to Wainunu Bay to work on 3 large estates, probably not even 1% of the people who live or are born in Vanuatu, the descendants of Girmityas, know that there was a very large tea plantation in Wainunu Bay by Captain Robbie. And Fiji actually exported tea leaves. There was a very large cotton farm estate on David Whippy's plantation. There was a vanilla plantation. They also had rubber trees. There was also another very large plantation besides these two called Kadiwanga Copra Estate. And they also had rubber plantations. Now, I will very briefly touch on the people who were prominent leaders during the Girmit era. So, one was Tota Ram Sandhya, or Pandit Tota Ram Sandhya, who then left Fiji and then went to India and actually sat in meetings with Nehru and Gandhi and other people to ensure the indenture system was gotten rid of. The other prominent leader at that time was Manilal. And Manilal and Sadhu Vasist Muni worked hand in hand. And Sadhu Vasist Muni and Manilal were then deported under the colonial administration. The other very prominent person was Sadhu Kupasamy, who came to Reki and actually was responsible for the setting up of many Sangam primary schools in the western side of Vitilevu. The other topic I am going to touch very briefly. I am reading comments on Facebook by some people that the progress of Fiji, we should also involve other people and other ethnicities. I mean, people make very immature comments when they write on Facebook. The economy of Fiji for many years, 75% of Fiji's foreign exchange earning was through sugarcane, bit of gold, bit of tuna export, bit of timber. And banana export also played an important part many, many years ago. And so did copra. So when Fiji relied on sugar, the other two industries that had a remarkable effect on Fiji's economy was copra and banana. And it would be wrong to say that other ethnicities or races were involved in the other two activities, because the banana plantations that were run in the inland of Naitasiri or Vunindawa, or rice farming, all the laborers were Indians or Girmityas or descendants of Girmityas. And same for copra. And when I was in class 7 and 8 in DAV Primary School in Ba, Fiji, and Xavier College in Ba, Fiji, I had the same impression that 99% or 90% of the copra farms were run by Fijians and Fijian labor. Till about 5 years ago when I began to research. And it was very surprising and actually shocking to me that it was the Indian Girmitya laborers who planted all the coconut palms on Rambi Island, on Tavyuni, on other islands in Fiji, such as Koro, Wakaya Island, etc. And the southern half of the Kondrove, or the southern half of Vanuatu, actually the whole province of the Kondrove. So basically Fiji developed because of the Girmityas and the Indians that made Fiji where it is or was prior to the 1987 coup. And it is very disheartening to see on Facebook or read on Facebook that there are comments made by the native Fijians or members of the Aitauki population that the low caste of Fiji Indians, if they do not like living in Fiji, they should go back to India. Let me explain very briefly of the caste and where and what its meaning is. My father's side of the family, I found out about 4 or 5 years ago when I went through the immigration pass and consulted other people, were actually Koris, K-O-H-R-I, Kori. So the Kori caste are populated the majority of Uttar Pradesh, the west side of Bihar, the whole of Uttarakhand, and northern Madhya Pradesh. And for thousands of years, they were peasants. And peasants does not mean that they only grew sugarcane or rice. If one studies the whole area, that is one area in the world where you can grow 2 crops per year, summer and winter. So the Koris, they planted rice during summer, and winter they harvested wheat, barley, sorghum, rye, etc. And also within that 12-month calendar period, they grew all the other pulse crops. And they grew varieties of dal, arar, moong, urdi, and sesame plantation. So sesame oil and mustard oil. And besides that, they were also dairy farms. They kept cows. And besides that, they were also herders. So they also used to keep goats for milk and also sheep. So to make derogatory comments that the Girmityas were of low caste, people should actually study the type of the type of Girmityas who came to Fiji. And to make such a statement that Girmityas are of low caste or were of low caste, you need to think twice before you make such statements. And the people who came from South India, they came with very, very skills. Wherever they were settled in any of the countries Girmityas were taken to. They were very good goldsmiths. Some of them were extremely skilled in manufacturing or making shoes or footwear. They were also very experienced in carving. They were also very experienced in woodwork. They were also very experienced or had knowledge of running a business. So they came with their own varied skills. And to those Aitoki Fijians who make this statement, if we were of so low caste and such low intelligence, and as I gave an interview to Fiji Village, that there are more than 500 people of Indo-Fijians born in Fiji, or some of them who are born overseas, that there are more than 500 PhD recipients and postgraduate fellowships. And many of these PhD recipients are also PhD supervisors. And that has happened in very few years' time. So if you look at the population of Fiji Indians prior to 1987, we were about 375,000 people. And if we have produced more than 500 PhD graduates or recipients, we, by population or percentage of population, have probably produced the highest percentage of PhD graduates per population in the world, or very close to. On the other hand, though people have written books, and I salute those people that with their own personal money they have written books and produced documentary movies such as Rajendra Prasad from Ba. He has spent probably more than $150,000 of his own money. Kirti Sharma, who has produced a number of video documentaries. Sunita Narayan, who has written a book. And few other people. And I salute those people such as Partap Chand, who has written his autobiography. The former Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji, Harish Sharma, who wrote his autobiography. And Krishna Dutt, who has written the whole history of Fiji Teachers Union, but combines with a lot of other information which is very relevant for the Fiji Indian community. Utkat Naikar, who lives in Brisbane, was a former Chief Executive of Housing Authority, who has written his own autobiography. And other individuals, such as Dr. Ganesh Chand, who has spent enormous time, and even myself, and late Professor Brisla. But a lot has to be done if we have to write the history of the Fiji Indians or Indo-Fijians. And I will also briefly touch regarding the biggest white elephant in Fiji, which is the Girmit Center. The Girmit Center was built, I think, around 1981 or 82. So 40 years has gone by. The Girmit Center was in the custody of people or the committee run by late Y.P. Reddy, who was the owner and director of the Tanwa Hotel Group of companies in Fiji and ran the Reddy construction. And the other person who was involved with the Girmit Center at Letoka was late Dijendra Singh, who used to be the campaign manager for the Alliance Party for many years, a very strong advocate of the Alliance Party and Indian Alliance for many years in Ba. And Y.P. Reddy was also a very strong Alliance Party supporter. But even when I migrated from Fiji in the beginning of 1991, till today there is not one single item to remember the Girmityas at Letoka Girmit Center. And so it is more than 40 years, and it is a shame that the Indian government actually funded the construction of the Girmit Center. And I think for the last 42 or 44 years, they've been allocating some funds for the running or the operation of the Girmit Center. I'm not quite sure of that. The committee is run by some other people now. But after 146 years, we do not even have a little museum regarding our ancestors who came to Fiji. I happened to make a visit when I went to Taviuni and Nambuwalu to do some Girmit research, and I spent time in Vanuatu in some villages. And to be honest, I could have loaded 2 container loads of items that would have been of quite significance to the Girmit Center in Letoka. I was able to find an operational deki, which was used to make rice out of paddy, couple of very, very old rice mills in Fiji, in Vanuatu, in Waingili, and many other such items which was used by the Girmityas or the first generation of Girmityas. But the people who hold these positions at the Girmit Center or Girmit Center committee, they are not dedicated at all. You know, there is the 1860 Heritage Cultural Center in South Africa. There is a UNESCO Heritage Center and museum and bookshop and restaurant in Mauritius. And we have nothing. You know, it is a shame. And in a few years' time, there will be no such items left to display, even in a museum. So, people who ran the Girmit Center or were involved with the Girmit Center in Letoka for the last 42 years, nothing has been done. And we as a community, we should be ashamed that we have nothing. You know, And Aitoki Pesan, who is actually a reverend here in Australia, communicated to me last week after seeing some of my presentations. And he said, it is very sad to see that there is no monument in Levuka or Yanuca Lailai. And when I told him about where the first Girmityas were taken to work on plantations, he said, Pravind, there are so many rich Indian businessmen in Fiji. We have so many Indian organizations in Fiji. Until now, we do not have any monument anywhere to resemble the first Girmityas who came to Fiji on Leonidas. And I think after 1881, when the Girmityas were finally moved out of Yanuca Lailai, maybe the first half of 1881, no Indian or Indo-Fijian has visited Yanuca Lailai. I think 3 or 4 months ago, Kirti Sharma went on a boat, wanted to land on Yanuca Lailai, but the captain and the assistant deckhand told them that they would have had to present a sevu before they could go onto the island. I have received email confirmation from the Department of Land and Mineral Resources that Yanuca Lailai is actually a crown land owned by the government of Fiji. The Tikina of Motoriki and the province of Lomaiviti. So I think a sevu will have to be presented to the chief of Motoriki or the Tui Levuka or the Tui Ovalau. But my concern is that if the government could spend $500,000 for the Girmit event this year, we could have allocated some money at least for a monument to be built on Yanuca Lailai. Number one. And then probably some money could have gone to building a monument on Rambi Island. And probably next year, then build a monument in Gila Tevuni by liaising and communicating with the president and Tui Dakau, Ratu Nengama Lalambalavu. And then a similar one could have been built next year in Naitasiri, and the following year in Duasamu Tailevu and Koronivia and Bila Levu Singatoka. So that's where I will leave it. And for those people who live in Navua, Vancouver Sugar Mill was one of the largest operator of the sugar industry in Navua. So if you want to read more, then you can contact me, and then I will email you some articles in an interview which we held with a Canadian professor, so that you can have a better idea of what the sugar industry was like and what hardship the Girmityas went through. So I will leave it there. Please share this with as many friends as possible. I just wanted to give a very brief overview regarding the 146 Remembrance Day or Arrival Day for the Girmityas who came on Leonidas and reached late afternoon close to the waters of the island of Overlow or close to the port of Levuka. And in my earlier presentations, I had provided the reasons why the Girmityas could not land in Levuka because of chicken pox, diarrhea, dysentery, and fever. And then it was decided that a quarantine station be built on Yanuca, and then they were transported there and held in quarantine. And for the number of days and nights while Leonidas was in the mooring ground, the colonial administrators had guards and police patrolling the whole of Levuka to ensure that no Girmityas jumped off the ship and swam to the shore. So thanks very much. This is Pravind Kumar, born and raised in Ba and Tavwa, and living in Australia for more than 34 years. So once again, Ram Ram, Namaste, Namaskaram, Walaikum Salam, and Bula.